Hi everyone, I believe that you're all doing great today, and it's so wonderful to be here with each one of you. Today we're going to be talking about the one of the four essential lessons of your imagination, and there are actually going to be four classes, and all four are going to happen within the space of 48 hours. They're introductory classes to so many people amongst us here who might just be knowing about, hearing about the power of imagination. And this also matters for you in case you have known about the power of imagination for a long time. Hi, Allison. Great to have you here. So, in case you've known about it for a long time, it still matters because it's never um, outdated, right? To learn about the power of imagination and to learn the essential principles. In fact, I think sometimes this is the most important lesson a person could focus on again and again as they also expanding their awareness on higher levels. So today we're going to be talking about the power of your imagination. The power of imagination. Or another way to describe this topic is that consciousness is the one and only reality. Either ways, you're going to learn how your imagination, or what your imagination is, how your imagination works. But of course, we still have very detailed lessons of how your imagination actually works in detail in terms of techniques. That will be happening tomorrow in the next two classes. And then would have the three processes of your imagination in the final class. But for today, let's learn about the power of your imagination. And I'd like to introduce you to something, and it is that all things in this world are first imagined. Now, that might be news to you, or that might be something you've heard or you've read, maybe from Neville Goddard, from myself, from some other person who teaches about the power of imagination. But I want you to give it a thought. Everything in this world was first imagined. It first had to be imagined. It wouldn't be, or we wouldn't know of its existence unless we first imagined it to be. Let me give you some examples. I have this. This is from a lecture called Fundamentals by Neville. I laminated it. It's 3 pages on print, and I laminated each one of them because I loved it. But look at this. The lamination was something I imagined first before I could do it, before it could become what I now call laminated. I first had to imagine that the lecture is laminated. The printing itself first had to be imagined. The writer, the author of this, was Neville Goddard. And Neville himself had to imagine the words before they could be written. He had to imagine writing them in the most understandable format before we could take it there and say, well, I read it and I understand it. Right? Now, the printer who did this work used machines. They used the computer, they used the printing machine, and so on and so forth. Each one of those machines had to be imagined before it becomes what we now call a machine, a printing machine, or a computer. And the software that was used to write it, to type it on the computer had to be imagined by someone who's called a programmer, right? Now, the machine itself getting down to me also had to be imagined by people who work in the supply chain, about to distribute it from the manufacturer to the producer, to the consumer, and so on and so forth. Everything in this world first starts to be imagined. For you would never get out of the bed in the morning to brush your teeth, to have your bath, to do all the things you do in the day, go out, stay, cook, or buy food from the restaurant, eat or drink, or so on and so forth, unless you first imagine doing each one of them. Do you realize that you first had to imagine them before you actually did them? And everything else in your world first had to be imagined before they became what we call done. I often fancy how my barber does my haircuts. And this is why I fancy it. I look at it and it would be full. Of course, when he has to do it, when he has to cut it, it's usually full. and I see that it is full. That's all I could see. And he is seeing the same object in my head, but he also has a power in himself that can see a form of my head that is not there, even when I don't see that. I want a haircut and I tell him this is the style I want, but I don't see how it could be or what has to be done to make it be. But he can see exactly what it would be like when it is done properly. And it does it. But it maintains that image. Do you know that if he changes the image, if he has to see something else, or if something else is in his mind, in his consciousness, that he's imagining as how my hair would look if it were done, I wouldn't actually have this product. I would have another product as the final product. It first had to be imagined. All things in this world tell me something. Just one thing that wasn't first imagined, and now we call it a reality. You can't think of one thing. Neville said it this way. He said, you can't think of one thing. Not one thing in this world that exists now, and it wasn't first imagined. Now, in fact, I asked a friend of mine that question a couple of days back, and I said this to him. I said, the funniest part is that you can't even think of that particular thing without first imagining what that thing would be. Okay? All things in this world, including the answer to that question, first had to be imagined. Now, you may say, well, yes, Adelere, you've been talking about the laptop, about the print, and your haircut, and clearly it's humans who make all of this. It's humans who make your clothes, it's humans who have to brush, and all of those stuff. So yes, agreed. Everything that humans have created first had to be imagined. What about the trees? What about the birds? What about the sun? And I would say this. You have a certain life right now, don't you? Yes. You live a life where you can wake, you can sleep, you can walk around the day, and live your normal functions of life as a human. And would you be able to do any of all of those things if all of those things are not in place? The simple answer, no, you can't. If the sun doesn't shine in the morning and rise where it rises and set where it sets, you wouldn't be a fully functional human being the way you've known yourself to be. In other words, the sun had to be for your imagining of you being a human to continue. You actually imagined the sun to be. You compelled its existence. How about the trees? Of course you compelled the existence of trees. Okay, so someone is maybe during winter and they start imagining what it is like to have summer, to have the tree and the breeze blowing from that to them. And then it comes. And trees grow, really, and they're fruitful, and there's wind blowing from the trees to them. And you think that wasn't first imagined by them? It was imagined. Oh, but the trees have been there for quite some time. Oh yes, you still imagine it from the depth of your own consciousness, but you forgot. And I'll show you that you forget. Because I'll only ask you a question. How many of your dreams in this year can you remember and tell me vividly what you dreamt? How many? Okay, there you go. If you've not been paying attention to them, you'll probably only remember 1, 2, or 3 of them, and the rest you most likely have forgotten unless you recorded them. So that's it. The dreams that you had, which are actually, where did your dreams take place? It's not your imagination. I mean, you see things, you hear things, you participate in events that are not physically in this 3D world, right? That are not there. But your body is lying on your bed or maybe on the chair and you dream. You're sleeping and you dream, but you see life somewhere else. It's all vivid, it's all there, it's all present. You can sense what it is like to fall off a cliff even though you've never fallen off one physically. And you wake up only to realize you've been on your chair all the way. So where did all of that happen? Was that not in your imagination? And yet you forgot what you just imagined in the dream. You forgot when you woke up. How much more the things you've imagined from eternity? Well, why is it so strange or so difficult to believe that you actually forgot them? Yes, you did forget them, but you imagined them. You imagined the trees. You imagined the stars. You imagined the sun. You imagined the whole universe. The universe isn't superior to you or something you have to try to appeal to bring your wishes or your desires to you. No, the universe moves. It's animated only because of you. Only because you move it. You animate it. You sustain it by assuming that you are human. Okay, now maybe you still don't quite grasp that. Then I'll ask you this question. How many of your dreams, when you are dreaming them, do you remember the current life that you maintain and have right now? Yeah, let's say you're dreaming yourself. Let's say you live in London. All right, you live in London, but now you're dreaming yourself to be in let's say you dream yourself to be in Iceland, right? So you dream yourself to be in Iceland, but you live in London. Now your dreams indicate that you're in Iceland. You could see everything you see of life is from Iceland in the dream. How many times do you remember in the dream that you actually live in London, that your body is in London, that you have maybe bills to pay, or that you have servants or waiting on your call? How many times do you remember all of those? Sometimes, in fact, you forget your name totally. You forget your family you come from. You forget that you have a nationality called London. You forget everything. You forgot the worries you had just before you slept that night, all because you're in a dream. And it's a dream that has a different story from the story you currently are living as your daily experience. You forgot about your daily life so much that you don't remember or have a recall of any of it in the dream. Then you wake up and you realize you're still on the bed. You resume this life that you know. Don't you realize that you could be imagining something so profound and so great as the sun in all of its glory and majesty, but you imagined it and you forgot because you imagined it from the depth of your own being. If you could forget your life that seems so important and so authentic to you right now, just over 4 hours or 3, even a 2 hours dream. In fact, sometimes a 5 minute dream, just a quick nap, and you forgot all about your current life and the anxieties, all the enjoyments and pleasures of it. How much more the dreams you've been having from eternity? So, your imagination has created all things. All things in this world, they first start to be imagined. Man, imagining, it creates. And what he imagines today is the prophecy of the sure facts of tomorrow. You want to make sure that something is going to happen tomorrow? Well, imagine it today. You want to make sure something doesn't happen tomorrow? Well, imagine anything in this world but that thing today. Just fail to imagine it today and it is sure it wouldn't happen tomorrow. Or imagine it today and it is sure it will happen tomorrow. And that tomorrow is not going to be the normal conventional tomorrow or well tomorrow, and then when tomorrow comes, another tomorrow. I mean, in fact, that which is certain or bound to be in time becomes like one of the beads that has been laced onto that line. And as you get through the threads, you reach that particular bead tomorrow, or eventually, which you have just assumed or imagined. God imagining is creating your entire life we call humanity. You are man, now you're man. Now that you imagine, you are also creating every experience of your humanity. And these two are not two, they're actually one and the same being. I am saying in the depth of your consciousness, you're imagining yourself to be human. And now on this level where you're aware that you're human, you can consciously imagine that you are a noble human, for example, and you'd be noble. Even if your background doesn't say you are, you might be starting from the scratch, from nothing, but you imagine yourself to be a noble human and you'd be noble. You imagine yourself to be a great human and you'd be great. Maybe you don't have any background, any association with greatness, no social contracts, no financial standing, but you imagine yourself to be great and you will be great. You imagine yourself to be highly appreciated, honorable, and you will be whatever you imagine yourself to be, you'll become. Man imagining is creating his own life, as God in himself imagining is creating that man and all of his life's experiences. Now, I want you to have a point of warning here, a caution. You have to operate it. It doesn't operate itself. Don't go, well, God is in me, so he's going to do the imagining for my life to be perfect. Oh, wait, I just said right now that the two of you are one. So you have to do the imagining of your perfect life, of your great life, of your satisfactory life. If you want it, don't think someone is going to do it for you. Don't think he's going to look at how much you've suffered and go, oh yeah, you've suffered enough. So now let us compensate you for all the suffering with the bliss or with joy. No, you are the operant power. Operant, that word means the one who operates, right? And power means the ability to do things. So we have power in us, but the operant power of the power we have in us is we ourselves. I empower myself, and the power that is in me, that man calls God, that is my imagination, doesn't operate itself for me. I have to operate it, because I am He. We're not separate. We're not different. We're one. In scriptures, you're going to find these two statements. The first is that the Father is in us, and the second is that Christ is in you. Ephesians 4 verse 6 tells us that we have the Father who is in all, above all, and through all. Oh yeah, it actually says above all, through all, and in you all. That's the order. Above all, so it's the depth of your being. Right? Depth of your being. The word above doesn't mean that it is higher than you. This you that you are aware. No, it's the same awareness. But above all means that it's the depth of your being. Alright? It is not of your faculties. None of your reasoning faculties. None of your senses. None of your physical life or your manifestations. It is more than that. It is imagination. So it is above all things you know in your life, above all things you've seen in your life, above all that you think or conceive yourself to be. You conceive yourself to be man, well, you're actually above that. You conceive yourself to be human, to be woman, you're actually above that. You conceive yourself to be husband or wife, you're actually above that. You conceive yourself to be a billionaire, a millionaire, a multimillionaire, or a poor person, you are actually above that. You're above all. Right? It doesn't mean that there is someone or something that is higher than you on the outside of you. No. The word above actually means within in scriptures. Okay? So the Father who is above all is you yourself. You are above all. Your imagination. This is why sometimes when a person goes, yeah, the imagination, the great faculty, I wonder, what are you talking about? The imagination is not a faculty. The imagination is the being. He has faculties such as desire, attention, acceptance, feeling. But the imagination is the being. Alright? And that is God. He is in you. Right? The Spirit of God dwells in you. This is said in scriptures every now and then, many times. Sometimes, in fact, to say, according as we're partakers of the divine nature. And I wonder, how did I not ever see that in scriptures until I began to understand this? We're partakers of the divine nature. You find that in 2 Peter 1 verse 3 and 4. We are partakers of the divine nature. I mean, I just wonder on that. So, I look at my body right now and I say this is human nature, but I am actually partaking divine nature. That means I can't think anything less of myself other than being God. That's it. That's the only divine nature there is. God. Divinity. Right? But you also have in scriptures, Christ in you, the hope of glory. So you have God in you. And you also have Christ in you, and Christ is the anointed of God. So Christ is God imagining or God in action. That's what we mean by Christ in you. That is simply God in action. So when you're aware of being, that is God. And you always are aware of being, mind you. Now, when you're aware of being something, that is Christ. That's why he says, I am sent. Right? And the sender is greater than the sent. Doesn't mean the sender is greater than the sent in nature. The nature is the same. It's divinity. But in office, I will send myself. I'm actually greater than myself. I can unsend myself. I can send myself for a different task. I can send myself to be this, or I can send myself to be this. Alright? But it is the same I. And all of this that I, that myself is being, there's still a part of I. Okay? So that's it. Christ in you simply means the imagining, the power to imagine. Now, as a result of this, all things are possible to you. If you don't accept that, ask yourself a simple question. Is there something that is impossible unto God? What's your answer to that? If you could find something that's impossible to God, well then, yes, that thing must be impossible to you. Actually, there is one thing impossible to God, and it is for God to not be God. Now, he may forget he is God, but that doesn't mean that he is not being God. In other words, that doesn't mean that he is not creating. He may forget, and you clearly have forgotten. I'm saying you're God right now, and you might be looking at it like, is that blasphemy? What is he doing? And I'm so sure of it that so many people would gladly right now take stones to stone the person or saying that they are God, not realizing they're simply doing the same thing as has been recorded in scriptures. When he said, I and my Father are one, they went, what are you doing? And they took the stones to try to stone him. But that is not literal. It's not physical stones. In other words, they took the fact of life. So you're taking the fact of life right now, you're stoning yourself with it when I say that you are God. You're going, hey Adelore, what are you saying? I know myself. I'm a man, I'm a woman, I'm limited, I have this nationality, I have this background, I have this parent, I have this family background. I am not proud of myself, I don't have this, I don't have that, I lack this, like that. I don't have this intellectual power, I don't have this emotional power. How could you say that I am God in the midst of all of that? And I'm saying, well, you forgot, but you are God. Right? You forgot, and it's okay. It's just forget it. You're here to remember, but you are God. It says, when the Spirit comes unto you, He's going to give you a remembrance of all the things that you've heard of me. So we've heard of all of it, but now we're remembering. That doesn't deny the fact, anyway, that we are God. That's what God cannot stop. That's impossible to God. To stop being God. But He can forget it, and He can act a role. He can act a play. He can sleep. But it cannot cease being God. Because you can't cease being aware of being who you are. Has there ever been a time that you just don't know that you are? Just don't know? Never. But you stop knowing that you are young and start knowing that you are getting old, right? I mean, that 20 years ago, you knew you were young. But right now, you know you're getting older. Okay. But you can't stop knowing that you are. Okay? So that is God in man. And if all things are possible to God, then all things are possible to this God in you. And you don't want to look for Him on the outside anymore. If God is in you, why do you want to seek for Him on the outside? Now, Scripture says it this way. It says, all things are possible unto God. Okay, that's unto God. And that should not be possible to any other person unless that person is also God. Right? But then Scripture also says, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. Now, take those two statements. All things are possible equals all things are possible. So take those two away, right? They're the same thing. Now, with God, it's the same as if you can believe, all things, if you can believe, all things are possible to him who believes. So if you can believe is the same as with God. If you can believe, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible. So God is believing man. And believing man is God. You are the operant power. You're man. But you operate at the moment you begin to believe. When you believe, you are now God. You're acting the role of God. When you stop believing, of course you've made yourself a limited man again. But when you believe, you've turned it on. That nature, it's like you can wear that nature. You can also say, all right, I'm not ready to exercise the power that I have in this nature. I just want to feel lowly and down and all of that. You can do that. But you can also choose to activate and operate that nature, from that nature. And all it takes as man is to switch by belief. As God, it's all possible. But as man, you have to switch by belief. That's the power of your imagination. All things are made by it, including this. Including your bank balance. If it's more or if it's less. I remember a time in my life when I would earn 120,000 naira over a year, over 365 days. At the moment, I could spend 120,000 naira in just a day. And I could spend it just for fun. In fact, I pay people lots more than that. And I could spend it just for fun. I could use it to buy something just as I wanted. 120,000 naira. What's changed was what I'm imagining. I'm just giving you an instance to realize that all things are really possible to you. So what you want to start doing is to start the dream. What do you want in your own life? Start the dream of what you want. What do I want? Now that I know that all things are possible to me, what is that one thing that I want to activate, to realize, to bring to pass? I am God. Okay, maybe I don't even understand that. Maybe I don't accept it. But can I test it? Bible says test it. Test yourself and see. Don't you realize that Jesus Christ is in you? If I ask you that question and you want to be honest with yourself, your answer would be, in all honesty, Adelary, I don't know. Or Paul, I don't know. And it's true. I got honest with myself also. I go, hey, listen, man, I've read this. I've read it countless times. In all honesty, I don't know. My experiences of life told me so far that I don't know. But now you say, test it. Test yourself and see. Don't you realize that Jesus Christ is in you? Oh, well, I didn't know. I didn't realize it. But I can test it. I can do that. You can test it, right? I can test it. So let me test it. If Jesus Christ is in me, and Jesus Christ has the power to change circumstances and situations in a person's life, then I should be able to change the circumstance in somebody's life without telling them. I did that the first time. I did it for someone. It worked. They went from having no job to having a job. I did it the second time. It worked. They went from having no job to having a job. I did it the third time. It worked. They went from having no accommodation to having accommodation. I did it another time. It worked. They went from having loans and debts to pay to clearing the debts suddenly. I did it another time. They went from having such hectic life in their family and in their PhD work and so on and so forth to having everything suddenly resolved. This particular one I mentioned right now took a year for me to realize it actually happened, because that a year after, I was looking at the notes where I wrote down after I imagined it, and I realized, oh my goodness, I did imagine this particular thing, and this person is really now overseas, continuing in their having progress in their work, in their studies. Their family, their mother is already healthier, their wife is in a better place, and I went, wow, I didn't realize that I had really done this until I saw that record. Now I tested it and I began to realize, oh wow, I'm realizing Jesus Christ is really in me. I want you to commit to the same thing. Now tomorrow, or rather in the next lesson, we're going to learn the first of the two techniques. There are only two techniques to operating your imagination, right? And we're going to learn the first of them in the next lesson. But until then, start the dream. What do I want? I want you to come to the next class with the decision that I'm going to test this power in myself with this desire. So what's the desire? Ask yourself now, what is the thing I want that I'll be testing this power with? I don't care what it is. I've seen amazing transformations. In my own personal life, I did a wedding. My sister said, I can't believe that you are now a husband. And I go, well, whether you believe it or not, I am. I did it in my imagination, and now I am. But the truth of the matter is that a year ago, exactly this time a year ago, if you told me, I wouldn't believe it. But I imagined it anyway. I didn't actually accept it, but I imagined it. And I imagined up until the point of belief, and it's hardened into fact. And I had three, not one, three weddings on 3 days to the same beautiful queen. So I know it works. Now tell you, come to the next lesson with a decision to try it. Until later, bye bye.